Hello, and welcome to TA Intel, a podcast about the business of business support. Each episode of TA Intel offers practical insights on leadership and professional development for the people who run and deliver services in entrepreneurial support organizations. I'm your host, Christian Conroy. I have over 30 years of experience in leading organizations that enable small businesses to start, grow, survive, and thrive. I provide leadership and strategic support to economic development and educational institutions across the country. I'm joined in this episode by Gina Ferraro. Gina is the State Director of the Wisconsin SBDC Network, and she will be sharing insights on the 2025 Accreditation Review of the Wisconsin SBDC. I'd like to introduce you to Gina Ferraro. Gina has been the State Director in Wisconsin since December of 2024. And before we get into the conversation, Gina, maybe if you could just take a moment and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the Wisconsin SBDC program, and then a quick overview of what the review looked like. For instance, when was it, and how many people are on the team, things like that, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Okay. Yeah, I have been in and around the SBDC for over 16 years. And but that was more from the financial and compliance side. So stepping into the state director role was an interesting shift for me, but one that I have enjoyed since then. So it's been a little bit over a year, and in that year was accreditation. And for that, we had 10 centers across the state. Each of them have a center director. And they are positioned at a University of Wisconsin institution. And we have about 30 collective employees across the state. And remind me if I missed a question.
No. When was your review?
Oh, when was the review? The review was October, at the end of October, the last week in October.
Okay.
And so I came in December and started preparing right away, knowing that with new leadership, several new employees, that it would take that long to get us ready.
Yes, indeed. So actually part of the first step in this process for everybody is to put together the self-study. And that can, really be kind of a daunting and overwhelming document. And I would just be curious to hear, a little bit more about how did you go about putting that together? What kind of process did you use? Did you involve anybody else? Looking back on it now, are there things that you would do differently the next time that this comes around?
Sure. I did look at other self-studies submitted by other networks, including our own that was submitted a while ago. But the first thing that I actively did with others was we generally have a January center directors meeting. And so it was there that we had working groups that looked at all of the self-study questions. And I asked the center directors when they were in smaller groups, but I asked them to put in bullet points. I didn't want them to write the self-study, right? But just give me the bullet points that addressed some of those questions. We couldn't get through it all. So whatever wasn't completed at that meeting, I asked them to complete it in waves. So in standard 1, I asked for comments back by February 28th, and then standard 2, a couple weeks later, that was due, and so on and so forth. So I had them give me those bullet points just to make sure that I covered everything that would need to be in the self-study.
Well, not only is that a great way for you to get, kind of broad perspective and feedback on each of the different points that the self-study is asking for you to provide data on, but it's also a way really to educate your team on what's behind each of those standards. I think that's a great approach. Based on how it went this year, is there anything that you would do differently the next time?
I did like involving them, but I probably wouldn't involve them in the same way next time, just because I was so new coming into it. So it was invaluable to have them involved at that level. So I don't know. I don't know how I would approach it, but probably different because I will be in the position a solid 5 years next time.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Good. Now, do you feel that the team read the report? Look at all the information that you shared with them?
Yeah, I did. And they didn't request anything additional, but I think the samples that were provided from the accreditation committee team, the supporting documents that they suggest, you don't have to submit everything, but I took that to heart and provided a lot of attachments to the self-study.
Okay, good, good. So switching to now that the team that has the self-study, they've read through it, they come to visit you, they go around and, they're meeting with your team. Do they tend to focus on any particular topics? Was there a couple of things that, really kind of stood out as areas that they were focusing on as part of their discussion?
Yeah, I think they did a good job spreading it out. And I remember them kind of assessing after the third stop. It was like, okay, what haven't we asked yet? And I almost feel like the fourth stop was got the brunt of the self-study questions, because it was like everything that was left over that hadn't been touched on yet was thrown at them. But they looked at our client survey process, the strategic plan, and how our committees were supporting the strategic plan, how our employees were onboarded. We had about a third, maybe a quarter, a lot of employees new in this past year. So that was an important part for them to dig into. And then they made sure to talk about key services offered at all the centers. And I think that's a soft spot, for everybody. They really care about their clients. So it was easy for them to talk about their client services.
Okay, good, good. What, in addition to having the center directors help you put together the self-study, what other things did you do to prepare your team for the review?
Early on, we have monthly webinars with the whole network. And so it was there that we just reviewed what accreditation was and kind of laid out the timeline of what's going to happen throughout the year. And one of the first things that we actively did with the entire network was put on a mock session at our June in-person network meeting. And we had a accreditation committee member join us virtually and walk us through that. And that was really fantastic. And there was no prep work, and we prepared them. It was like, we understand if you aren't familiar with the material and don't have the answers yet, we just want you to get a feel for what it's going to be like. And then our associate director, she also took a lot of time reviewing the standards, particularly with our onboarding group. I had mentioned that we had a lot of new employees, and so walking them through individually, she met with them every other week for quite a while, and towards the end of summer, she started reviewing the standards with them. We also, once the self-study was in a pretty good draft form, we started creating an LMS system. We had a couple students helping us put it in the system, but our associate director was really helping them, providing the content for that. And that was a great tool just from a leadership perspective to make sure that, yes, people are reviewing the material, and I can look at, who hadn't done it yet. And so that was great. And then so once they went through the LMS, then it was, then we had regional mock sessions. And this was more, to kind of test where they were, how they felt with the material, if they needed to do a little bit more studying or review of the standard, reading the self-study if they wanted to. So those were great. And then if they did, we did provide like digital flashcards of potential questions. And so if they felt like they needed more information and wanted to build that confidence a little bit more, they could do those digital flashcards just like a couple of weeks before the review team actually came out. And then about a week or two prior to the visit, we did have the virtual meet and greet. And I think the committee really emphasizes the need for that. And that was great. You know, get that out of the way, get the faces in place, and have that done prior to the visit for sure.
Well, I mean, that certainly is a very comprehensive approach that you took to preparing your team. I can see many people reaching out to you after this, wanting to learn a little bit more about some of those details, because I can see them wanting to replicate it in their programs. Very, very creative, and because you've addressed, you know, the various different types of learning styles I think that people have by the different approaches that you took, and the kind of constant and repetitive communication to, you know, make sure that, you know, because people take in information in different ways, and you really addressed that, I think, quite well in the approach that you took.
Yeah, and I'll say that was not all of my ideas. I'm not going to take credit for that. We have some center directors that have been on staff for multiple accreditations, and you know, one was like, "Oh, we really would like some flashcards. If you could do them digitally, that would be great." And then another one was like, "Oh, we need to have a mock session." And the regional mock sessions really came out from the center directors wanting it. So there was a lot of involvement at that level as well.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I realized that the, you know, review was happening fairly early in your tenure as the state director in Wisconsin, but, you know, were there certain things that you wanted to get out of this review that would be helpful to you in terms of moving forward with some of your priorities? You know, did you use the review in any way to try to help address those or move those issues forward?
Yeah, in my previous position, just sitting on the sidelines, you could tell sometimes the centers were working in their own silos and not utilizing kind of the expertise or the strengths within the entire network. So we did kind of ask the review team to maybe highlight the importance of collaboration and utilizing that unified guidance and tools for the clients. And I feel like we're in a better place now because of that.
Okay, good. So, you know, then, all right, so you did the self-study, the team came on, you know, visited around with everybody. What was your team's reaction to the review after, you know, the end of that week?
Yeah, I was surprised by some of the feedback that we got. You know, we did provide lots of preparation and wanted to make sure that they were confident going into it. They were I think so ready for it that they were surprised that, you know, some of them only answered one or two questions. And they wanted to answer more. And the review team did a great job involving everyone, right? But the staff were answering those things so well that sometimes we didn't need multiple people answering the same question. And so I think the reaction was like, I studied so much for this, and I wanted to be answering more of those questions.
Was there any like level of frustration from your team that said things like, "Well, we included that in the self-study"? No. Okay, good. All right. You mentioned, you know, surprise. Was there anything that happened that, you know, you weren't expecting, or were there things that you were expecting to happen that didn't occur?
You know, on a lighter note, I was not expecting to have a good time. In between the reviews, we really tried to highlight Wisconsin for the committee members. And so that included indulging in cheese curds and kringle and custard, and we really did. We had a good time.
Good. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I think is nice, is it's an opportunity to, broaden people's perspective about the different cultures that we have all across this country. And serving many years on the accreditation committee, that was something that I really valued, from being able to go and visit other places. Which kind of reminds me, speaking of that, thinking about the structure and how the review went this time, and then I know you don't have to worry about this for another 4 years, but anything, come to mind about things that you might do differently next time? I mean, you mentioned, exposing them to things that are unique to Wisconsin. So maybe some changes with schedules, or who you would involve, or maybe the preparation type of work that you did. I don't know, any ideas on things you might do differently?
I did grab the schedule and logistics template from previous accreditations, because I think that seemed to work well. I think I mentioned earlier, we have 10 service centers throughout the states, but we only had 4 stops, and each stop had about 6 to 10 staff. And so I think, if anything, I would make sure that that was a little bit more equally distributed. And so maybe those employees would have more time, more questions to answer. That would be my only change, I think.
Okay. All right. So, there's 3 phases really to this process. I mean, the first is putting together the self-study. The second is the on-site review. And then the third and final piece is the report. And so I think you've gotten your report back now at this point. What is your reaction to the report? Is it, and how helpful is it to you as a leader in terms of using this as a tool to move the program forward?
Yeah, there were no surprises. The review team gave a really thorough exit interview to the associate director and I before they left. And so there were no surprises, but we did use the report. We got the report mid-December, and we used the report at our January center directors meeting to incorporate those recommendations into the strategic plan. So that, probably touched on standardizing client intake and client onboarding a little bit more than what we were doing. So it's our first step in standardizing the way we do things across the network.
And what was your team's reaction to the report? Do you know?
They weren't surprised. I think both through the mock session and through my associate and I, we did kind of warn them that conditions are okay. We don't have to be afraid of them. And it's something that we have time to work on. And so we had one condition in the draft, and another one was added after the committee reviewed it. And we're not worried about them. There are things that we wanted to change anyway. And so they weren't surprised either, or they weren't worried with the results.
Good. Well, that's terrific to hear. That's really all I wanted to kind of cover with you. But, just before we break, is there, any other thoughts or feedback that you might have for your colleagues across the country, tips for them to consider when a review is coming up for their program?
Most recently, and you might hear this in your upcoming interviews, but at the winter meeting, I discovered somebody in the network used AI to convert their self-study into a podcast, and thought that was a great tool to offer to the staff. Just one more way to learn.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. I bet I know who that was.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Gina, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. I hope that your colleagues across the country that will, are tuning into this to watch this, got some, I think, very valuable tips from the experience that you've had recently here in Wisconsin. And I wish you, all the best in terms of continuing to move forward in building out the Wisconsin program. And it sounds like having the accreditation review early on in your tenure as director is actually going to be something very helpful to you to enable you to be more effective in this role.
Now that I'm through it, it was quite a process to get ready for it. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it was helpful. But it was a pleasure being here with you today. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to talking to you again if needed.
Thank you, Gina. And thank you for joining us. We would appreciate it if you could do 3 things. 1, subscribe to TA Intel. 2, share this podcast with your colleagues. And 3, leave us a comment on what you would like for us to cover in future podcasts. We hope you will join us again in future podcasts of TA Intel.
Welcome to the Ascend Accreditation Accelerator. This program is designed to help you streamline your accreditation process. The purpose of the Ascend program is to ensure you are fully prepared for accreditation. We will help you assemble the necessary documentation and understand the standards. Through Ascend, you will receive tools for development, management, and benchmarking. You will also get samples, interview exposure, and an assessment tool for your program's operations. The program includes 7 on-demand webinars detailing the Ascend model process. It also features 6 live peer learning sessions on Wednesdays. Ascend provides 3 key tools and essential resources to demonstrate meeting the standards. A key item is the Accreditation Documentation Tool. This helps manage the materials to include in the self-study. The program also includes a benchmarking tool with charts and data to compare your performance against peers. You will use the Ascend Key Components Assessment to review strategic thinking, planning, and program results for learning and improvement. You will learn from veteran SBDC leaders with real-world experience, who will share proven and tailored approaches to manage your program and achieve accreditation. For more information on the Ascend Accreditation Accelerator or any of our services, please contact Christian Conroy.
TA Intel is a production of TA Advisors, LLC. Copyright 2026, all rights reserved. Information available at taadvisors.org.